Alright, good day everyone, and welcome back to X4. I think at the end of our last episode it became very clear to our character, Mr. Raibu Hurricane, that dramatically more was going to have to be done in order to keep Earth safe from all the various threats that are now lurking out in the network. The status quo is clearly not working, and he and his growing organisation and the Terran Secret Service are probably the best ones to do something about it. Now, in order to go through some of our objectives and our goals as we move into this more empire-building phase of the game, where we want to show off more factory building, military operations, fleet combat, etc., I think we need to start with a solid plan and a solid sense of our goals. And as we all know, all great military and economic projects can only ever begin one way: with slides.
So every great plan should probably start with its objectives and priorities, and for ours, I think, the number one priority is pretty damn clear. For roughly 17 billion different reasons, if I remember my lore correctly, Earth has to be kept safe, and it has to be kept prosperous. If we start to work out what that means, we can probably start with the most immediate threat, and then start extending outwards. Firstly, we need to protect it from immediate threats, like the Archie we just dealt with, although there are probably others out there. Then from the Xenon, then from the possibility of anyone ever remaking the Xenon and then becoming a threat like the Xenon before them, which has also happened before. And then finally, from threats that might exist beyond the bounds of the gate network as we presently know it. We know, for example, that there are Xenon that are not currently connected to the network. They might become reconnected, they might slow boat using non-FTL methods of travel. We don't know, and we have to be prepared for just about anything. And considering our character also now knows there's a super powerful race out there called the Sonin, and that there's a lot more going on, being prepared for anything has taken on a whole different character. So how then can we work the problem, if you like, of those threats in sequence? And I've come up with a very basic 4-step solution. Firstly, we need to stabilize certain aspects of the security situation across the network so things don't horribly collapse while we're doing the other steps. Then we need to establish all of the supporting infrastructure, organization, military assets that we're going to need in order to accomplish our objectives, and then go about accomplishing them. Destabilizing the existing order, restabilizing the new order once we've achieved the changes that we want, hopefully leading to a situation where we've destroyed the threats and win the peace. Because we don't just want to go out there and achieve a military victory if it turns the entire network offside. We need to win friends and influence people. We need to get our economic tendrils, our influence, spread across the network, and we need to win hearts and minds in a very genuine way if we can. Because the more united as much as possible of the gate network is, the easier all of this is going to be long term. The reason I think we focus on stability up front is because it's just a more efficient use of limited available resources. It's probably going to take much less in terms of economic and military punch, for example, to keep a faction in the fight against the Xenon, rather than to let it collapse and then pick up the pieces and dig the Xenon out of those sectors later on. While we're still at a relatively resource-constrained phase, we want to tip the balance in places, not beat the status quo to death with a sledgehammer. Thus, it might make sense to protect and preserve the Split, at least for the moment, despite the fact the Split are undeniably arseholes. Because while they may be, as we said, arseholes, they are fighting the Xenon, and the Xenon are far worse. So, in order to figure out where we might need to intervene in the short term in order to achieve that stability objective, I've thrown the map of the known network up on screen here. Everything's color-coded by the default holding faction, so some of this has already changed. Getsufune, for example, is now Terran Protectorate territory, and so it shall remain. But pretty instantly, if you're looking at this, you can probably identify a few potential pieces of critical terrain where we might have a real interest in intervening. We haven't spent much time up there yet, but critical point 1 is probably Family Zin, a sector in Xioth Patriarchy territory. If you look at that sector, its importance and the reason it might be under threat is immediately obvious. It's connected to a range of Xenon sectors, which means it's going to be under constant pressure, like much of Split territory, but it's also important for both economic and logistics reasons. Realistically, it's the only mining sector that the Xioth Patriarchy have that can actually meet most of their requirements. If they lose it, their economy is basically doomed to strangulation. It's also doomed basically to have their territory cut into two, unless they want to take a long diversion through multiple other factions' territory. Family Zin connects Family Newt in the Network East to Wretched Skies 4 in the West. Considering the Xioth Patriarchy actually has one of their key shipbuilding facilities, a wharf, 2 provinces over, again, a loss of Family Zin would likely be disastrous and potentially cause the overall collapse of the Xioth Patriarchy in that part of the network. It would also basically allow the Xenon to consolidate, get access to more resources, without increasing their frontage with other species that much. If you take families in and family crit for the Xenon, for example, they go from bordering 2 provinces in that direction, family crit and families in, to bordering 2 provinces, Wretched Skies 4 and family newt. They don't gain any additional frontage. If they then expand to Wretched Skies and family newt, just keep the ball rolling, again, their frontage doesn't change a huge amount. They just become more dangerous and more concentrated. So if you're looking for a sector that mustn't be allowed to fall, families in is probably number 1. I've circled some free families territories in the east because they're also under considerable Xenon threat, but not quite as dire for various reasons, nor are they quite as important. The split military force is basically all built by Xioth. The free families are demilitarized, they're basically a vassal state at this point, so them losing their construction capacity is less important in terms of the war against the Xenon than Xioth losing theirs. They're also not quite under as much of immediate pressure. Their province connections have more redundancy, and there's a bunch of Taladi over in that zone, so any Xenon invading them are more likely to encounter the Taladi as well, drawing in Taladi assets to try and fight them back. We want to fight fewer engagements where possible, not more, considering at this point we have exactly 1 capital ship capable of holding back the tide, so let's leave the east for now. The second identified piece of critical terrain is the sector of Hatikva's Choice 1. This is on our list because it's both a vulnerable point, being controlled by an independent faction, although partially garrisoned by the Argon, because it's vulnerable to Xenon incursions because it's connected to Tharka's Cascade 15, which is a very resource-rich Xenon sector, and so ships pour through the connection relatively quickly and frequently. And finally, because if it falls, bad things logistically are likely to happen. The superhighway runs through Hatikva's Choice 1, so if the Xenon are able to break into the sector and seize it, they have unlimited access to the superhighway. That gives them the ability to spread fighters and raiders basically across the entire inner ring of the network, even if they're a long way from there, and problematize everything. Trade, transit, shipping, you name it. It also cuts some of the Argon sectors in two, which is not great for us because eventually we want to see those human-controlled sectors consolidated. We do not want to see them overrun by the Xenon. So if there's a general rule, it's that the Xenon need to be kept away from the superhighway, and the easiest way for the Xenon to get to the superhighway is through Hatikva's Choice 1. And so there we need to make a stand. The final point I wanted to identify is a little bit different from all the others, and it's in the galactic, or rather the network south. This is a series of 4 Xenon provinces that border the Holy Order of the Pontifex in the east and Argon and Antigone to the north, but it's just 4 sectors concentrated against these 2 powers. And not just concentrated against them, Faulty Logic 1 is directly connected to Holy Vision, which is the primary center of HOP shipbuilding, the center of some of their major defense fleets, and also where, at least in our game, a lot of their economic resources have been built up, and I've pumped additional miners in there already, and for reasons I'm about to explain, I think I need to do more. I don't think the Xenon here need to be held back. I think there's an opportunity for the Xenon here to be eliminated. The Holy Order of the Pontifex is usually one of the most powerful military factions on the map. They have sort of the Prussia benefit of being concentrated with all of their resources there, and a relatively powerful military that doesn't have that far to travel in order to do a lot of damage. So I figure if we pump enough resources into the Holy Order, and to a secondary extent some into Argon and Antigone, hopefully the sandwich pressure of them will clear out Faulty Logic and Atia's Misfortune. That would unlock a lot of additional mineral resources in the south for potential exploitation, both by the factions but also potentially by us. In the ideal world, what I would want to do is get to Mists of Artemis, which is a neutral sector, but as you can see indicated, is an incredible resource-rich sector, which is neutral, which borders a bunch of incredibly resource-rich sectors. If we were able to take Mist of Artemis, we could turn that into one of the best, most profitable secondary HQ shipbuilding centers you can imagine. It's also a province where one of the Timeline's vessels that I really want to recover, an old Sapporo-class destroyer, is in Mist of Artemis, and getting there would be a lot easier if all those Xenon were gone. So the action here is more economic than military. Provide as much resource boost to HOP and to a secondary extent Argon and Antigone as possible, mostly by setting up additional mining ships to support Paranid industry, and hope that by the time we're ready to move down there, maybe the Xenon have been cleared out. That will partly benefit Xenon in other part of the network, because they'll no longer be trying to support these enclaves, so it might make them more powerful elsewhere, but I think there's an imperative to try and get these Xenon that are vulnerable down here cleaned out without us having to do it ourselves. So we're looking at a situation where a lot needs to be done. It's very clear that the Terran Protectorate is not interested in doing these sort of proactive measures for the most part. And so what we really need is an organisation that is willing to basically go out there and do it itself. So if you're watching this series, you can consider yourself proud founding members of an organisation dedicated to making sure that Earth remains unconquered and undefeated. Welcome to Terra Invicta. Under the overarching heading of that organisation, we're going to have 4 parallel lines of effort running at all times. So every episode, there should always be actions happening under each of these headings, and each of these headings represent different sub-organisations. Firstly, something should always be happening to expand our productive capacity and also our trade and economic influence. Trading will be handled by the Terran East Network Trading Company, or TENT, while construction will be handled by our Aerospace Production Wing. And to that end, I'm happy to announce the recent acquisition of Cord Hislop Aerospace. The second line of effort will be fleet-based, primarily based on key point defence. Basically, we need military assets that are going to go out there and very publicly attempt to hold families in Hatikvar and other locations like it. That'll be done by a private military organisation that'll hold most of our spaceborne assets, and since they are the border, they are the marker, they are the line of defence, we're going to call them Terminus. The third line of effort, because I can't resist even if it is just a video game, is diplomatic, political, roleplay-esque stuff that you would expect to try and win you influence and friends around the network. Think things like creating jobs, providing medical supplies, increasing food supplies, fighting crime, etc. Finally, while Terra Invicta is ticking over in the background, there's also a role for constant special intervention, someone who can go make shit happen in a big and dramatic way, operating independently in order to move the needle. That's going to be us. In terms of deciding what our economic and production requirements are going to be, I've set out a couple of elements that I want to meet. I think we want a dispersed economic network so that we have facilities that can provide us centres of power around the network, but also allow us easy influence over all of the main economies. We essentially want factories close to all of the empires, the Taladi, the Paranid, the Split, Argon, Antigone, etc., not just so we can maximise profits, but so we have maximum influence and control. If an economy becomes reliant on us to provide a critical good, for example, they won't build up productive capacity of their own. They'll focus on other requirements so that if we ever suddenly turn off the tap of that critical good, we can create, at least in the short and medium term, a major shortage, which might be what we need to do under certain circumstances. For roleplay purposes then, what we don't want is for those factories to be in the territory of those empires themselves, because you would imagine that were that to happen, a government might, in reality, step in, claim eminent domain, and seize control of your facility, apply pressure, etc. But if instead of basing in those empires, we based in nearby neutral or friendly sectors, say Terran space, Queternaut space, neutral territory, etc., their options realistically from an RP perspective and a practical military perspective would be much more limited. We also want to cover all technology bases, so there's no technology in the network that we can't duplicate, no method that we can't employ, and we also have certain output requirements we need to meet. What that means is we need to have at least 3 shipyards using the 3 different shipbuilding approaches. The Terran model, the Universal model, which is the main factions, and a third model which was introduced in Tides of Avarice, which is called the closed loop model, but it's basically the scrap model. It's where you produce certain families of ships and technologies by recycling the wrecks of other ships. That leads into our specific output goals, the things that we need. And I think at minimum we need the following stations. 3 shipbuilding complexes, Terran, closed loop and Universal. A station dedicated to supplying Terra, at least one of them, so the Terran shipyards can run at full bore, even if the resources aren't all diverted off into our shipyards. We need a station dedicated to producing the sort of resources that our HQ station is going to need en masse for high-end research and later for cool stuff like terraforming. That's what I think the Queternaut facility is going to be. We need construction materials and we need cash generation. Those last 2 can be spread across multiple facilities. I expect we're eventually going to have a lot of factories, but those are the sort of things we're going to need. Based on those requirements, I've come up with this as a sort of first stage construction plan. The orange circles represent 3 primary shipyards using 3 different technology sets, with the green circles representing supporting stations filling other needs. Terra, so Mars, Forge Complex Mars, will be our primary Terran shipyard, at least for the moment. Getsufune is a great place because lots of Xenon coming through the gate, plus there is a massive natural supply of wrecks in the station, and we're close enough to Mercury that I can ship energy cells, that I think that's where we're going to put a closed loop facility. It also gives us a shipyard very close to the potential front line between the Terrans and everything else. The final candidate for a shipyard is, I think, the unclaimed sector of Heretic's End. I'll talk about why in a moment. But that is a fantastic place for us to claim, I think, and establish a base of operations and a functional universal-style shipyard. As for the green circles, we already know our facility up in Boron territory. That's going to make water, later potentially hull parts and other useful things to support the Boron and also maybe our other operations as well. We should probably build a station down in Sagaris Pioneer territory to use their mineral resources and support the wider Terran economy, although not in a way that makes Sagaris too militarily independent from the Protectorate. And then finally, we're establishing a facility in Quetanort territory up in the Network East, and I think that one's going to be configured for a combination of building supplies initially, so things like hull parts and claytronics, but also goods like advanced electronics that our HQ is really going to need in significant numbers going forward. The reason I think we need to focus on Heretic's End, by the way, is that it combines excellent strategic geography with amazing economic and political opportunity. It is essentially a transit point between the Argon in the southeast, the Split, who, remember, are at war with the Argon to the north, by extension sort of some Paranid off to the north as well, and then to the west you have the Boron, who again are at war with the Split. So we're essentially putting ourselves in the middle, which is a great place to be. Economically, there are some resources in Heretic's End itself, and it is neutral, which means we can claim it, but there are also lots of important resources just off to the west in Watchful Gaze that we can access to fill in the gaps on what Heretic's End itself has, and if we're willing to go a little bit further, 2 jumps into Argon territory gets us to Morningstar 4, which is a safe sector, and has some resources as well. So we won't be wanting for resources, but we can also claim it as our own centre of power. The final thing to note about Heretic's End is it's a 181% sunlight sector, so almost twice the usual energy generation. I don't want to have to ship energy cells in from anywhere else, and at 180%, as long as we're not running anything too energy intensive like Terran modules or the scrap modules, both of which I propose to supply from Mercury, we should be able to domestically produce everything we need there to limit our logistical burden. Okay, so we've talked about the sectors we need to protect, the economic resources we need, and where, at least initially, we're going to build our first family of stations. What about the final component? Intervention. What do we need as Raibu Hurricane in order to get out there and have the maximum possible impact? The most important thing here is just a ship suitable for whatever job we have in question. We have a good fighter now, a good small class ship in the form of the experimental shuttle. We have a fantastic corvette in the form of the Adachi, and also a Kuro Kami that we got from the Yaki, which is piloted by Shinneman at the moment and is heavily modified. But what we really need is a ship that can go out there and fill 2 different roles. We need a fast-moving expeditionary battleship for exploration when you need a lot of guns, and then we need something with a supreme amount of firepower for when we really need to kick in the door in the way that no other vessel in the Gate network can, at least outside of a Xenon Eye. Thanks to the addition of the Tide of Avarice DLC, there is a good option for number 1, and it's the unique battleship, the Earl King, that we can go to the Tides of Avarice sectors in order to recover. This is a unique vessel. There can only ever be one in the network, and you have to capture it and then slowly rebuild it. It doesn't come with many components at all, and it can only use unique technology in a lot of its module slots. So there's a lot of work involved, and that also means not just capturing and recovering it, but also establishing our own extra-large shipyard bay. Because since the Earl King uses unique modules and unique technologies, you can't use someone else's shipyard in order to refit it for you, at least not fully. So we're going to need enough money to buy the blueprints for an extra-large production bay so that we actually have what we need to refit this thing. But it's still probably the quickest, cheapest way to get access to a battleship of our own. And while the Earl King doesn't have a huge amount of shielding, it's pretty vulnerable, what it does have is a lot of speed. I think this thing can do like 500, 600 meters per second just as a battleship in ordinary non-travel speed. Plus it has a lot of long-range, very capable, quite versatile firepower. So for general use, this ship would be fantastic. It also has a lot of cargo capacity, I believe. So if we ever need to move a lot of cargo to a very dangerous sector, let's just say we need to, for some reason, resupply the Yaki station, or get there, grab a bunch of crew and get out, this would be the ship to do it. So this is the one I want to recover in the near future, and it's going to be the objective for the second part of this episode. Later on, we're going to want something slower, less flexible, but with a huge amount of additional firepower and shielding, and that's the Terran Asgard. You can't buy this thing. The only way to get it, if you're not willing to capture it from the Terrans, which would obviously be treason, and which we would never, ever consider, is to buy the blueprint at great expense, buy the module blueprints for it at great expense, buy an extra large shipyard blueprint at great expense, establish them all, and then build your own. That said, this is the only battleship you can have multiple copies of, and it was designed for a singular purpose. The Asgard destroys Xenon capital ships. It's the big brother of the Sin. It has a giant mega death laser on it that is intended to make Xenon capital ships, and to an extent Xenon stations, go away from beyond their ability to respond in terms of range and reach. And so I want one. We'll also, of course, want more combined arms forces that can protect the battleships and engage in more complex operations. So think things like carriers, fighters, auxiliary ships to do repairs, etc. But one step at a time. Okay, so let's frame that all up into next steps. There's a few things we need to in the short term. We need to get a little bit more intelligence in split territory, and we need to get our hands on the Earl King blueprints and the Earl King itself. That we'll try and do in the immediate future. Diplomatically, we need to get to the avarice sectors in order to get our hands on the relevant blueprints for the scrap economy and the ships you can build doing it. There are 2 factions over there. We need to beat both of them, and we need to earn up to plus 20 reputation with both in order to get access to all those blueprints. What does Terminus need to do? Terminus needs to get Delilah's Swansong, and it needs to get its butt refit, and then probably over to Family Xin or Hatikva in order to contain the Xenon, because they're starting to get much more aggressive and much more capable at this stage in the game. Economically, at this stage, we're basically stacking cash. We're stacking cash because we need to buy the small and medium shipyard module, the large shipyard module, and the extra large shipyard module for different reasons. The small and medium shipyard is a great cash earner, plus it can build medium miners. The L shipyard will give us a cheaper way to get L miners and L traders, and the extra large shipyard we're going to need in order to refit the Earl King, and eventually to construct things like the Asgard. There will, of course, be much, much more, and we're only at the start of this stage of the game. But rather than letting the planning run too far away from us, I reckon we have more than enough objectives to get on with it for the moment. So let's disengage our top-tier planning software and get back to making this happen.
Okay, so to start making all this happen, the first thing I've done is swung over to Paranid territory, because I need to get a promotion from the God Realm. And the reason is we need access to some technology pretty rapidly, because we just don't have the capital ships available to respond to every threat there is. So let's go say hi to these guys. Receive my rank.
We've been observing you and your activities with some interest. Some have called for you to be recognized.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Do I get my technology now?
To present you with, as with all honors,
yes.
us, as we have judged you worthy, you will henceforth go. There are a number of organisms with our blessing.
Yes. May the holy fires burn within me. Great. Okay, alright, so I have the technology. Can I grab a police license while I'm here? Thank you.
Safe journey.
Okay, so what I'm buying here, which will take a while because they're short on advanced electronics, is a Theseus Vanguard, which is a 3-gun fighter equipped with these things. Burst rays. Burst rays do basically no damage to shield or hull. Under ordinary circumstances, they are awful weapons. But against capital ship components, they're incredibly damaging, as I'll show off. So even if we're in a situation where we can't, if we need to stop like a K and we don't have a capital ship in station, I can hopefully teleport in and use this thing to rip apart the components of that ship and give the local defense forces a chance. We'll order that. It'll take a while to manufacture. While that's happening, I'm refitting Delilah Swansong. It'll complete its refit at the Terran shipyard. Then it has to go for a second refit at the Argon Prime shipyard, because Terran turrets notably are sort of generalist entries. If we want to specialize it, some of the Argon options are arguably better. So we want to swap out the large turrets for plasmas, so it's optimized against capital ships, and the medium turrets for flak turrets, so that it has at least some anti-fighter options. Overall, though, I'm going to optimize my capital ship killing capital ship for killing capital ships, and that means swapping over to Argon turrets. While all that's happening, and the station builds are in progress, I've got build carriers getting components I need in order to keep these things moving. I'm going to jump back up to split territory and try and gather some intelligence. If you look at the faction information for the Xioth Patriarchy, which is the ruling split faction, basically the split into the Xioth Patriarchy, which is the ruling faction, and the Free Families, who at the start of the game have just been defeated and are effectively partially demilitarized. Their sectors are policed by Xioth, who is the current nominal leader of all the split. They are at war with Antigone, Argon, Terran Protectorate, Boron, Fallen Families, Kark, Xenon, Yaki, etc. But you'll notice they are indeed very negative with all the human factions, and they previously tried to wipe out the Boron, hence why they are in a state of all-out shooting war. So yeah, great start there. Also split with some of the ones keeping Bozo captive before we freed him and got him back to the player HQ. We're now traveling to meet some of Dow's contacts who might be able to tell us more about the split. In order to win over those contacts, we need to go save a hijacked ship. But who has that ship been hijacked by? And this links to the diplomacy before. One of the reasons the split are so hostile with all the human factions is because they have a tendency to keep humans as prisoners with jobs.
Autopilot.
Some of those prisoners with jobs have objected to their working conditions and are currently engaged in kinetic industrial action on a split vessel. And our job is to go save the hostages. The hostages being the...
appears to be
That's not a ship. Thank you, Bozo. That is indeed a rock.
That's what you got off my sensor data?
obscure readings can result in low levels of certainty.
Yeah, Alright, so we have to go find this ship. I'll ask around for a way to Tharka's Ravine 16. But, yeah, our job is to save the hostages being the people who were responsible for those very poor working conditions. So right off the bat, you can imagine how good I feel dealing with these people. But, alright, let me go find this hijacked ship and do as Dal requested, because some intelligence would be helpful.
Rather well.
Alright, I think we found it.
Try asking the pilot whether they recently escaped slavery aboard a split station.
Ah, yes, Bozo, that'll go really well. Hey, thanks. For once I agree with Dal. First time for everything.
This is your first and only warning. Do not approach any closer or we'll open fire.
They don't seem very welcoming.
They have just escaped indentured servitude, Bozo.
With those other fugitives on board.
Yeah.
We'll have to persuade him if we want to get our hostage.
Oh, you're... Thanks, Dal.
Is that really necessary?
Yeah, I'm with Bozo.
They only need to think that you're willing to kill. Oh,
well, in that case.
Crew quarters.
Alright, so apparently I need to engage a ship that has been taken over by former captives in order to free their former owners. This feels great. Let's go.
You may live to regret that.
We cannot tolerate your actions. Stop your attack immediately.
Ceasefire.
There we are.
We're ready to negotiate. We're willing to give up the hostage. Dock on your ship to pick her up.
Thank you. This is why one of the reasons why I brought a small ship. Immediately proven is that in a lot of missions I find you can't dock a medium, which is why I brought the experimental shuttle instead. It's fast and has a lot of firepower. Obviously, I still prefer the Adachi.
Split go home.
Split go home?
Trader Tree calling foreign vessel. Foreign vessel will release a split hostage immediately.
Okay.
Split go home. Please comply.
Thank you,
The timing of that
Split.
was rather suspicious.
Sir?
So just to confirm that I've obviously made the correct friends, I have to deliver the hostage I just rescued to the aptly named Slave Trader 3, which is just over here.
Docking granted.
And yes, it is very suspicious that this vessel was just here ready to go. But you can instantly capture the split aesthetic. Black and red, angular, very... a design which tells you that they are coming for you and that they are going to cause serious damage when they get there.
Before you leave, you better have a little
Oh,
chat
they use the
with
elevator.
pilot.
Excellent.
You may have made a friend after all.
Yeah, probably, Dal. I'm just not sure how I feel about it. Let's go talk to the pilot. This is a split bridge. As you can see, bit of a different aesthetic.
Creature is welcomed aboard Slave Trader Tree. Split not found of outsiders medding with split matters. Fugitive has been under surveillance. Contact has been made to negotiate hostages' freedom. Hostage situation was under control. This creature's reckless behavior.
They were negotiating with the hostage takers. I rescued them.
This creature did try to rescue one of ours.
I'm sorry.
Pilot can make
There was no try, there was
by
only do.
attending funeral of Split War hero. Pilot, meet our ship at accelerator in heart of acrimony. pilot also bring customary gift of caviar.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so they're annoyed that I rescued their person because they were
Experimental
negotiating
shuttle.
for their release, and I rescued them.
Okay, I found some more data on her in the train station's records. This was apparently a curb, a female advisor to male split decision makers. These curbs were originally set up by Patriarch Gus de Guild to temper the worst excesses of male split's enthusiasm. She belongs to Takur to Sink, a minor patriarch who trades in Argon slaves with the Syrarth Patriarchy. She was probably out here to clean up on the fugitive property mess, which caused a significant loss of face for her male counterpart. Not that family Takur has much reputation to lose these days.
Alright, so that's some useful information. I'm still feeling... Well, I know this is the way the game is played in Split Territory. I'm still feeling a little bit annoyed that I rescued one of theirs. They then told me I was terrible for doing so, and now they've demanded I come make recompense by attending a funeral. It's okay, I will, as a sort of meet and greet and to gather more information. But they've asked for a Spacefly Caviar gift, which is worth about 1 million credits and is highly illegal. Harvesting Spacefly eggs is illegal, but I believe I have some saved up. If you get 25 of them, you can use it to make Spacefly Caviar, which we're going to give to them despite the fact that it's worth, as I said, about 1 million credits. Great start. The refit of Delilah's Swan Song at the Argon Yard, meanwhile, can now be locked in. It's finished its upgrades at Luna. We're going to leave the Terran shield generators and everything because they're superior to the Argon options, similar for the engines. What we are going to do, however, is swap out all of the large turrets for Argon plasmas. Terrans don't have a plasma turret. Plasma is much slower in terms of projectile speed than any Argon-type turret, but as you can see from the average turret weapon output as we install these, we're getting a lot more raw damage. So it's a capital ship killer through and through. So the Swan Song should now be on its way to Argon Prime, and then it'll be ready for its first deployment. Its first deployment will probably be Split Territory. I think that the start approach would be Family Jin, just because it's so critical. If they lose Family Jin, they don't have a mining location in the west, they can't support this wharf over here. Fantastic for the Boron, but terrible for all these split sectors, and very, very good for all of these Xenon, which we don't want. If I had more capital ship power over here, but this is sort of something we'd want a battleship to clean up. Like, the Terrans have a battleship, the Asgard, formerly of the AGI Task Force. Now, you can't buy those from Terran shipyards, but you can eventually get the blueprints at exorbitant costs, so that's going to be one of our long-range goals. A battleship might be able to go up against this, and we said we need one. But, alas, we don't have one. So let's get the intelligence from the split, and then let's talk about the main objective for this section of the episode, which is getting access to scrap technology, and also that project to, as I said, get an expeditionary-type battleship. Okay, so as I said, in order to get access to the scrap economy, and also a potential candidate for a sort of expeditionary battleship that will enable us to be more effective with our time, we have to go into the sectors belonging to another DLC, Tides of Avarice. And here we are. This set of sectors is also a relatively recent reconnection to the Gate network, and it's occupied by two separate factions in two separate sections. First we have the Windfall sectors. We've just jumped into one, Windfall 1 Union Summit, and instantly you will see swarms of fighters around the place belonging to the Vigor Syndicate. The Vigor Syndicate is essentially a group of organised crime gangs and bodies that have banded together in order to exercise effective control over this area of space and keep governments and whatnot out of these sectors. If you want to know what sort of people the Vigor Syndicate are, every sector in the game has some sort of illegal wares that you can be arrested for carrying. The Vigor Syndicate prevents individuals from carrying water and food supplies in their sectors, because that way they have a monopoly over the supply of food, water and medical supplies, which presumably drives up their profit margins. So there we are. We will have to build up some reputation with them, at least initially, because they have some very interesting blueprints. The idea with the Avarice sectors is because they were cut off from the network and cut off from a lot of desperately needed resources for a long time, they instead developed a parallel economy where what they did is essentially recycle damaged and destroyed ships. So they can manufacture ships using basically the wrecks of old ones, and that's technology I want to get access to. It's very energy intensive, but some of the inner sectors, which we'll explore in the moment, the actual Avarice sectors themselves, even though they're very dangerous, for reasons we will learn about, they have very, very, very high energy multipliers. So the energy of avarice powers the scrap collection operations of Windfall and generates these massive fleets of fighters that you'll see the Vigor Syndicate using. One of the ships I want to get access to eventually is actually this one, the Barbarossa. The Barbarossa is an L trading ship. No, we want an external view, sorry. There we are. That's a Barbarossa. So it can be manufactured from scrap. It's a large trader, but it's a very fast large trader that has less cargo than normal in exchange for an incredibly heavy armament. The thing is basically pirate-proof. And because it can be manufactured using the closed loop method, the scrap economy, if we can get access to a Barbarossa blueprint, eventually we might be able to swap from having to build all of our freighters using Terran or eventually Universal methods to being able to build a basically pirate-proof destroyer freighter hybrid using scrap, which would be absolutely fantastic. And as you can see here, the Vigor Syndicate uses them not just as traders, but also as sector patrol craft for security purposes, the way other factions would use destroyers. Don't mind me, guys. I'm just exploring.
Britson,
And here we are. We get to witness the Vigor Syndicate shaking someone down, I presume.
What rules? I'm trying to make a living here.
Okay, one last time. No illegal wares.
What does illegal even mean in these parts? You're just taking whatever you want.
Basically, they are criminals.
Quit whining. We're not taking anything that isn't already ours. You weren't supposed to get this far in the first place.
You have no idea how important this is to me. It's all I have left. My family is starving.
Of course I know that, idiot. It's how the business is run. Our lives are all just business, and you've made a miscalculation. Now drop your cargo.
You know what? No, not this time. Riptide, you out there? Want to come and help settle a few scores?
Not part of the plan, not part of the plan. The boss will be so mad.
And that's how things apparently work around here.
It, come on, final chance.
Hey, you. This is syndicate business. Stay away or else.
And, yeah. Welcome to Avarice. It looks like that freighter is going to be lost. I really wish we could jump in, but the reality is we need to get access to the technology and a bunch of stuff from this area first. But I think our character watching this is going to get a very clear view of what the Vigor Syndicate is. And there will eventually be a reckoning. Just probably not time for those poor guys over there.
A large vessel? Such a power signature points to some rather unorthodox engineering.
And this is what I'm interested in.
It is easy to see that this ship is formidable, albeit not yet complete. I fathom that, when fully constructed, few could stand against it in direct conflict. Perhaps it is worth considering a boarding operation, although I do not expect it to be a simple matter.
Now, if you're wondering what Bozo is referring to, it's this thing right here. This is the Earl King. It is at this point a... Let's be honest, it's a piece of shit. It's an half-assembled idea, not a functioning warship. Basically, the story behind the Earl King, and as we explore a little bit more, we'll have access to some of this information, is the Riptide Rakers were starting to put together a capital ship out of basically scrap and pulling everything together. They were in the research phase, and the Vigor Syndicate came along, stole it, parked it here at their keep safe, which is like one of their central secure stashes, but doesn't have the knowledge necessary to actually finish it, nor do they have a shipyard capable of finishing it. I don't think the Vigor Syndicate has an extra large shipyard, only small, medium, and large. So even if they had the technology and know-how, they can't finish the damn thing. It is an entirely unique vessel with immense potential. So we need to do two things if we want it, and I want it, because its basic characteristics are that it's heavily armed, very, very fast for a capital ship, and we can get access to it without needing to buy, for example, Asgard blueprints or whatnot. It's a very useful direct intervention warship. So we need to do two things. We need to capture this and escape with it, and the other thing is we need to explore the Avarice sectors for various data vaults containing information on how to build its turrets, how to build its shields, how to build its engines, even if we later replace them, because there's a lot of unique technology that goes into the Earl King. Once we do both of those things, the third thing we're going to need is a shipyard capable of accommodating it. because the ordinary faction shipyards won't allow you to retrofit it. You're going to need a facility of your own, because they don't have access to the blueprints. You can take it to an Argon shipyard and install some Argon technology, but a lot of the weapon mounts only accommodate Earl King technology, which means we're eventually going to need our own extra large ship construction bay. And that's going to set us back a casual 300 and something million credits just for the blueprint before we even start getting building. So while I'm going to work on acquiring this thing, and we'll talk about boarding in a moment, we're really going to have to slow our roll on station construction just a bit, stack some cash. We're at 50 million. We need to get up to 300 million in order to be able to afford the infrastructure we're going to need to retrofit this thing to its full potential. Now, there's a few other sites to see in the Avarice systems that we'll scout before we go out. We found Keep Safe, which is like the stash of the Vigor Syndicate. We found a wharf belonging to the Alliance of the Word, which is an interesting location. A station that I'm going to crash into.
Welcome to the Aurora Casino. An exciting experience like no other. Enjoy and discover a wide variety of
Yes, there is a casino station.
Xenon invaders, ride the tide, traveling to Lottie.
Surrounded by a dystopian nightmare of a region controlled by
Visit
organised
our
crime, but still.
establishment now for a generous starter bonus with the potential to win real credits. Where else would you show off and improve your skills, if not at the Aurora Casino, which regularly pays out millions of credits?
So yeah,
That's
Vigor
a
Syndicate.
score for the lucky ones.
Alright, let's fly to Avarice.
Mayday, mayday. Ship bestowed in perpetuity. Inbound for tide break. Major engine failure. Need engineers for repairs.
Negative. Bestowed in perpetuity. Tide is inbound.
We'll talk about the tide in a sec.
Scramble a volunteer rescue team. How many occupants?
Just me. Negative on the rescue mission. I will get it to work.
Nah, we'll go save you, mate. There we are, bestowed in
Call again should you
perpetuity.
change your mind. Good luck.
Any engineers out there? Please hurry to my location.
So we're going to help this guy out.
Repairs. Please report immediately.
Because you always want local contacts.
Engineer. Wonderful. Quick, do an EVA and try to fix the remaining engine. I am trying to fix something with the engine control from in here.
Alright, I'm going to help this guy out, and I'll tell you how the tide and everything works. Alright, so apparently his ship is completely stuffed, so we just got to convince him to get out of there. The life support is failing.
Failed yet. There is still time.
Your ship is beyond repair, mate.
It looks like I have to cut my losses. I will evacuate to your ship.
Thank you.
Please pick me up.
I'm frustrated we couldn't save your ship either, because L traders are good.
Here.
Experimental shuttle.
Yeah, we can do that. I'll just need to get back in my ship yet, grab this guy, take him back to a station, because the Avarice sectors, in exchange for the benefit of having very high energy production, every hour or so, the sun explodes, for lack of a better word.
Approaching your ship.
Radiates out something called the tide, and if you aren't ready for it in a sufficiently protected station...
Requesting docking permission.
There you are, we got him. Your station is destroyed. So stations here have to pay to get access to a technology called a Protection module, which is a single-use module.
We need to escape the looming tide. Let us head to Tide Break. It was built to withstand the event.
Or you can go to Tide Break, which is built into an asteroid and always immune to the tide. So we'll go dock at Tide Break. But yes, be aware that if you build anything or station ships in this sector, every hour or so they will all be destroyed unless you've taken proper measures. That is the trade you make. So, for the Riptide Rakers who live in Avarice, they have to put up with the tide, they have to put up with pain to be immune to the tide, if they run a station, and they have to deal with the fact that the Vigor Syndicate controls all the sectors leading in or out,
docking granted,
and thus the supply of essentials of life. So, it's a rough gig, the Riptide Rakers. But what we'll do is we'll start bringing supplies that are not illegal into both on repeat orders in order to start building up our reputation and move towards getting blueprint access.
Tide Break.
So this is Tide Break,
for the eyes.
Reinforced station that's immune to the tide.
People. Home of profit.
As our new friend is telling us.
Friend, I made it.
I see that. But
Where is your ship?
His ship
there,
is
not too far from the station.
soon to be gone.
Out there, you say? I see. Out there. So, you need a new one?
Yep.
How much can you advance me?
Let us say you will get a share of the first profits.
Sure, you can make that acquisition. I know you do not accept handouts. Ah, there
She's
it
also
is.
taking credit. Very generous
Always
of her.
a sight to behold.
There goes my property.
I have something cheap for you.
Here comes the tide.
But claiming it is a bit hands-on.
A scrapyard salvage.
Yes, one of those.
You know, I am an inexperienced pilot.
And somewhere out there, his ship just went. You can see where this is
major
going.
damage.
He's going to want my help salvaging a
Is your
ship,
friend
which is
over
fine.
here a better one?
He sure is.
You've
Picked
known me
up
for
in my
about 3
spacesuit
minutes, mate.
And got both of us out of there.
Brilliant. That's settled then. I will be on my ship. You
Is
can
anyone
meet me
going to
there
ask me?
once you are ready for a salvage adventure.
No?
Thank you so much for helping me.
I will help him out, get him on board, and then get ourselves set up for this, let's just say, a more grandiose salvage operation of our own. Okay, we're jumping forward a couple of hours because we're almost ready for our Earl King recovery operation. We're just flying away. I'm in Delilah's Swan Song, just flying away from the Huttigva's Choice Gate. I had to divert the Swan Song to respond to the fact a Xenon capital fleet rolled through, destroyed the defense station, and it was only our intervention that managed to stabilize the situation. I've dumped a bunch of laser towers just to hold off any fighters that attempt to follow. I was so focused on responding rapidly that I forgot to record it. I will not forget to record capital engagements in the future, but we've managed to hold them back for now. I'm going to need to quickly refit this thing and then head back up to split territory, I think. Having only one destroyer to cover a lot of territory isn't ideal, but as I'll show you soon, this thing does really, really well against Xenon destroyers, at least so far. Let's talk about the plan for the Earl King. So we've already seen how you can potentially capture small and medium type vessels. You bully them until the crew bails, and then you take it over yourself. With large and extra large ships, it's a little more complicated, and it involves basically sending Marines in boarding pods over to the vessel to breach through its hull, neutralize any resistance, and take the ship that way.
Hello there.
To do that, we need a ship that's suitable for buying or transporting Marines. The best candidate I have discovered so far is the Shuyaku Vanguard, which is a barely armed trade ship, and a very expensive one at that, from the Argon. But its best trait for us is that at maximum complement, a Shuyaku Vanguard can carry 255 Marines. A base preset at the moment goes for about 9.9 million with that sort of full complement, which is almost, almost 500 Marines, 450 odd Marines. So we've bought two, and they're both stationed at the Vigor Syndicate Keepsake, hanging around near the Earl King. Looks like that Riptide Raker ship is moving past. Just waiting for the order to finally go against the capital ship. Now, the order structure would be something like a board. This would bring up this screen. We'd be able to assign both ships at once. Then what we do is we drag how many Marines we want to board. The maximum number of Marines you can use is the boarding capacity of the vessel. So this would be 328 attacking Marines against 200 defending crew. I only have recruit Marines. You can do better than this. I think this should be sufficient, but there are places that you can recruit better Marines, including from the Vigor Syndicate themselves. That's one way to get higher level Marines straight out the bat. But I just thought it would stretch the story just a bit if I went and hired Vigor Syndicate Marines in order to take over a Vigor Syndicate ship. That just seems like it would be a recipe for them to just wander off with these Shuyaku Vanguards, claim them for their own, and then tell me to deal with it. Even though I've now slowly been building up reputation with them. So we're going in with, I believe I'm using Argon Marines instead. It'll just have to do. What you have down here is your controls over when the Marines push forward and do various stages. So the stage one is they approach, they go in their boarding pods, and you get to control when the boarding pods launch. What you want, my personal preference, is launch at combat effectiveness very strong. So this is basically saying, how long do you want to hold the boarding pods on? If you hit very weak, they're not going to launch until almost all the defending turrets are destroyed, so the boarding pods have the maximum possible chance to reach the vessel. I don't want that. I want the boarding pods to launch straight away, because the Earl King in its current configuration has like one defensive turret. The risk to the boarders is relatively low, and I don't want to spoil our surprise by shooting at it first. Then they have to cut through the hull. The question is, when do they start breaching the hull? How much damage do they wait for you to do? You speed this up by doing damage to the ship. But if we set this to very strong, it's going to take them forever, but they will torch their way through the turret, the hull themselves and breach it that way. It'll diminish the effectiveness of their combat operation, it'll cause it to take longer, but it means that they can do it without us having to blast a hole in the ship. Then the final stage is once they're in, they'll fight against the crew, they'll take casualties, and then hopefully eventually take the ship. When we're ready, all we'd have to do is hit start operation. So in a moment, what I'll do is, because I find this interface easier, I'll hit start operation, we'll teleport over to them, and then we'll watch the boarding play out. Then I'll teleport out and get the ships out of there, because I imagine the Vigor Syndicate will not be happy with us. I will disable the turrets on both of these vessels to minimize the amount of damage we do to, say, passing fighters, for example. So if I look at this Shiyaku Vanguard and I look at its loadout, these turrets are all set to defend. What I can instead do is disarm the defense drones and disarm the turrets. I will do this to both vessels. That way they don't shoot at anything by mistake, which will just make the situation worse. All we need them to do is launch their boarding pods, and then we need to get out, preferably with one or more of these ships, although if we lose both, might still be a decent trade if we can get this Hulk out in response. Okay, I think everything is set and ready. Let's go. Board. Very strong. Very strong. Deploy the maximum number of Marines. Start operation. They will then move to target. We can probably live stream this actually.
To target.
Okay, pod launched, moving to target. We should start to see them coming off the first transport now. If we go to the map view. There we are, pods are launching. Okay, the Marines are on board, the hostility has died down. We lost a couple of pods. I did get both of the freighters out just. And now the Vigor Syndicate appears to have calmed down because they can't do anything at this point. I'm not actively shooting them. The Marines are on board their ship. There's nothing they can do at this point. While that's happening, let me give you a quick update on some of the industrial efforts while the Marines are engaged in some property acquisition for us. The Matsuno's Defiance facility continues to expand. What we have it expanded to now looks like this. And basically what we have happening, even though I don't have a full workforce yet, only 2 living quarters, although I will expand that, is a station that is now capable of producing, if we go to the logical overview, silicon wafers, coolant, antimatter cells, graphene, protein paste, and a whole bunch of stuff, but the main endpoint is this. Claytronics, which is one building supply for universal economy stations, and the other one is hull parts. So we have hull parts and Claytronics going on in this part of the gate network. To get them being produced in the other part of the gate network, we'll expand this with more workforce, but to get those being produced over in Getsufune as well, which is a very strategic sector that we need to build up, that's where we're going to put our scrap station. Haven't laid down that plot yet because we're saving resources for what I'm going to talk about in a moment, but this is going to be our candidate for the scrap station. Meanwhile, the boron station, the water refinery, is expanding to also be hull part production, not Claytronics, they're much more complicated, but at least hull parts to speed up local construction, make some money, support the boron, because there's a lot of building sites that the boron have that are waiting on thousands and thousands of hull parts. So if we can provide those, the boron should benefit, and so will we. The Terran station, Forge Complex Mars, has continued to expand, mostly with the addition of additional workforce at the moment. I've added more silicon carbide, more metallic microlattice to the point where now we have 5 substrate, 7 lattice, and 5 silicon carbide. Our workforce is at 4,700 with a capacity of 9,500, but we need 13,000 just to efficiently run what we have at the moment. So more MREs, more medical supplies, more accommodations required. We will get there. As far as workforces go, Terrans are needy bitches. They are resource intensive, they require a lot of space, you can't fit as many into their living quarters as elsewhere. On the plus side, you can feel good knowing that your workforce is operating in relative luxury, and you can fly ships through these rings if you want to build your own little mini racing game. I also gave them a casino. The other thing I've done is started to work on sector reservation, just so other factions don't expand in and take them. I have no interest in these neutral sectors down here at the moment because they are absolutely chock-a-block full of scale plate pirates, like saturated with scale plate pirates. So I have no interest in them at the moment. The one I have interest in is over, where is it? Over here, Heretic's End. This sector I have immense interest in, and we're going to come back to it, but we talked about that earlier in our briefing. These ones that are saturated with pirates, it's just I don't want the Paranid to move in and claim them. So now we have this shiny green color, thanks to these small little stations. All it is one dock, a pier, and an administrative center and a couple of turrets. That's it. That's it. But that now means that Terminus controls these sectors. That means very little for the moment, but it does mean that the Paranid won't go in and claim them. We might take this later, but in order to make these sectors really useful, the scale plate would have to go. Also, just to give you an idea of the scale of the build-up that has been going on in the background, as I steadily suck more and more mining ships out of the Commonwealth economy in order to power the Mars Forge complex, there are currently 43 mining vessels supporting Forge Complex Mars. Not to mention the transports that are keeping it sustained. And some of them are large ships. Like I have these Magnetars. These are relatively expensive L-class traders that I have brought in from Antigone and Argon. So yes, I may be indirectly contributing to their hull part shortage. Sorry, not sorry. Better than sucking them out of the Terran shipyard economy, which is still not fully supplied despite my increased productive capacity, but is certainly getting there. I have so much more mineral throughput, and it's still only just keeping up with the capacity of that Terran facility. So the Terran economy is very resource intensive. What I do want to do, as noted earlier, is at some point set up a secondary facility in the Sagaris territory, not one that produces all goods. We don't want to create that sort of strategic situation where they have an independent production of all the goods they need. But I think we could tolerate a huge increase in the number of micro-lattice factories. There's a huge amount of demand soak for that. And also potentially things like protein paste or other goods that we could potentially, civilian goods that we could supply in a way that would make sense given what we are going for in terms of the geopolitical outlook. In any case, I'll continue with it while I wait for the Marines to update me on how the boarding process is going. My big tip with boarding actions is never underestimate how many Marines you need, especially if, like me, you're using rookies. Because we have lost 41 trained Marines overcoming a crew that says they have much less boarding resistance than us, like much less strength, but neutralizing 30 crew has cost us 45 Marines so far, which is an interesting exchange rate. The defenders have significant advantages, as you can imagine. They would be able to vent sections, they would be able to control security doors, all of that sort of stuff. So, unless you have very expert Marines, quantity matters, and we're going to lose a significant portion of this boarding force, I imagine, before the defending crew is neutralized. You know, there's a lot of things to say about the deteriorating security situation. Yes, I know you're taking heavy losses. We have Xenon Xenon M operating in Argon territory around Hatikvar. I've deployed the Delilahs.
Sorry, sir. This isn't looking
good. It is looking good, you're just losing people. How about I try and brief you after the Earl King is captured? But yes, I have deployed a destroyer back up to split territory. We have a partially constructed defense platform to finish off, and then we need to switch back to the south again, because the Xenon are intruding, they're trying to build factories. As you can see, there's a lot of continued harassment of some of these facilities. So
continuing combat.
It's a pretty involved task holding them back out of split territory at the moment. Okay, it's cost us 2/3 of the boarding party. 230 Marines have become casualties, but I think we are about to take it. There are 2 defending crew left. Boarding resistance is 0. 1 defending crew. Alright, stage completed, stage completed, stage completed. Fantastic. Alright, I'm going to teleport over right now. Let's see if I can avoid ramming into this station as I very, very slowly, although by battleship standards, doing 170 meters per second in this piece of garbage, not bad. Do I have any active armament? I have 1 medium turret. No wonder I only lost 5 boarding pods. Let's disarm those. Let's disarm the drones. Don't need them. And let me drive this thing all the way back to a shipyard to at least get some basic overhaul before we have our own facility for it. Okay, since there appears to be no immediate danger, I've pulled over a Terran crewman just from one of our other ships, and I'll have him fly back to the first shipyard we can get this thing to get at least some basic equipment on it, while I go and hunt around the various sectors for the specific technology we're going to need, and of course slowly build up the credits we're going to need for a larger shipyard. He's not going to be the final captain. He's just the first person I found in the menu, but he should be able to fly this thing at non-travel speeds, get this Hulk to a relevant shipyard. I'll also retask the 2 Shuyaku Vanguards, because now that they're not needed for marine duty, I can actually turn them into trading transports. And okay, with the view from the landing pad on our boron production stations as the miners take off and land, that's probably where we're going to end the episode. We've set out a plan. We have long-term objectives. We've explored Avarice. We've gained some intelligence on the split. We've obtained the, I suppose, base hull of the Earl King. And what we really need to do next episode is twofold. We need to get our military resources scrambled and deployed so that we can start actively defending Split Space before it all falls apart in dramatic fashion. And secondly, we need to think about getting our shipyards together. Because if we can get shipyard infrastructure established, we can get the Earl King retrofitted, so that we have something to seriously throw at problems whenever we need something heavy hitting. And also we can start producing vessels, not just for the Terran Protectorate, but most importantly for ourselves. A much cheaper way to access miners, transports, and whatever else we might need. That all begins with the establishment of a new ship production capacity in Mars. I hope you're enjoying the series. I hope you didn't mind the move into slides just for a single presentation. They won't be a recurring feature, but they just seem like the most effective way to set things out for the moment. So thank you all very much for watching, your continued support for the series, and I'll see you all again soon.